Your son, he's gone. He was weak and foolish, like his father. So I destroyed him.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic. Before the Dark Times. Before the Empire.
The belonging you seek is not behind you. It is ahead.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Training to become a Jedi is not an easy challenge.
I'm not afraid.
You will be. You will be.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Weak and Foolish Movie Podcast. Tonight I am your host, Job Eng, and with me is...
Mike Tang,
and we've got a show for you all tonight. Tonight we are covering the series from whence our name was born, Star Wars. We're really excited. As you know, The Rise of Skywalker, the film that serves as the conclusion of the saga that George Lucas began in 1977, is coming to a close in less than 2 weeks. So to celebrate and get ourselves ready, and hopefully get you all ready as well, we thought we'd do a Star Wars retrospective. We'll cover the saga's major story points, particularly from the standpoint of the Skywalker family, and then we'll delve into some themes from these movies that have endured and stuck with us, and then at the end we'll do a ranking of what we feel are the best films in the saga. Obviously, before we begin, this is a spoiler-filled episode, and we sort of assume that you have seen these films before. If not, there is still time. You still have a few days to catch up on the 10 films, or 8 films, depending on which part of the Star Wars saga you're trying to get into. But yeah, these movies have been called the Skywalker saga by the marketing geniuses over at Lucasfilm. So before we get started, I wanted to see, Mike, how are we feeling? Are you ready? How have you been prepping for the conclusion of this saga?
I am so excited and stoked out of my mind. I'm counting the days until Rise of Skywalker comes out. I wasn't feeling this way a month ago. I hadn't rewatched any of the Star Wars movies yet. The trailers, they only dropped like 2 trailers by that point, and they haven't really revealed too much about the movie. But I think once Disney Plus dropped, and we had all the Star Wars movies at our fingertips, my wife and I, Cheryl, we just started to rewatch the saga, starting from episode 4, 5, 6, then 1, 2, 3. And just going back into Star Wars and going back into that world and into that family, I'm just so excited. I think the fact that Emperor Palpatine is in episode 9, I think it gives so much weight to all those movies that came before it, right? Episodes 1 through 6,
right?
Especially the prequels, because Palpatine's such a major character in those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that he's in episode 9 and he's going to face off with these new characters like Rey and Finn and Poe, and Kylo Ren, that's really exciting to me. And I also love the fact that J.J. Abrams has said the goal with episode 9 is to wrap up everything.
Yes.
Episodes 1 through 9. So the entire saga is going to come to a close. He wants kids to be able to watch starting from episodes 1 through 9 and see one continuous story. And I just love it when the final film in a franchise does that. When it addresses and references all that has come before it. And of all franchises, this is the biggest one, right? Like this is the longest mega franchise I think the world has ever seen.
Yeah.
Right, starting from 1977 with the original Star Wars. So I'm just so excited. I love Star Wars. It's such a big, grand story, and I think just the trailers have really sold it as an epic finale.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That made me feel a little emotional.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, Mike and I, our friendship began with a film called Interstellar, but it really blossomed when we watched The Force Awakens together. It's been 4 years now since that came out.
Wow.
A lot of life has happened. A lot of career changes have happened for us. I feel like we've grown a lot since we first watched Star Wars together. We've come to appreciate these so much more. And I feel the same way. I'm so excited, ready to see what happens. The Last Jedi was divisive, to say the least. And we were a little unclear on how we felt, too, when we first saw it.
Actually, I think we were very clear on how we felt, but I think since then we've kind of changed.
Yes, yeah, that is true. We were pretty upset, but I think we've come to appreciate it now as Rian Johnson taking some risks, and I think it's good for a franchise that's been around for so long to change it up a little bit. But now we're at the conclusion of this grand epic story. So I think, do you feel like it's a good time to jump into the overviews now?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So this is a wonderful time to jump right in. So we're going to talk about what is often called the prequel trilogy. Now, they're called prequels because they took place before the trilogy that George Lucas originally made. But we're going in chronological order because we're talking more about the chronology and the story of these movies and not so much the production timeline. So just to make that clear. So let's begin with the prequel trilogy. I'm going to give a little overview, and then Mike is going to talk through some themes, and we'll kind of piggyback off of each other from there. The prequel trilogy is made up of what are called episodes 1, 2, and 3, with the titles The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. So this trilogy sets the stage from a story perspective for this whole epic. In this trilogy, we meet a young slave boy named Anakin Skywalker, who is an insignificant life form, seemingly, until galactic politics bring Queen Amidala of Naboo and 2 of her Jedi protectors to his planet of Tatooine. We're introduced to the Jedi here as an order of guardians of peace who have special powers, special connection to what's called the Force, and they're able to use that for good. So no sooner have they met this boy, Anakin, who's actually a slave, when they realize that he's a little different. He actually exhibits strong abilities in the Force as well, and stronger than any other Jedi. So one of these Jedi, Qui-Gon Jinn, believes that Anakin is actually the fulfillment of an ancient Jedi prophecy. That is, that a chosen one would come and bring the Force into balance. So he works to free Anakin and succeeds, eventually allowing this boy to join the Jedi Order as a Padawan learner to hopefully fulfill his destiny as the chosen one. We move into episode 2 after that. Anakin is now a teenager. He's strong in the Force, but he's angry, a little rebellious, feeling suppressed by the restrictions of the Jedi Order. He feels that his abilities are beyond him. Like he feels like he's being held back from what he can truly achieve, what kind of power he can truly access. And because of that, though he's gifted and good-hearted, he begins to feel temptations towards giving into anger, which is what the Jedi don't actually condone. And so Supreme Chancellor Palpatine then uses that frustration to start to manipulate him, to tell him what he wants to hear. We later find out that Palpatine is an evil Sith Lord, the ancient enemy of the Jedi, but we don't get to that just yet. Anakin also sees his friendship with Padme Amidala, the queen he met previously, blossom into a romance. It's a type of love that the Jedi Order actually institutionalized as forbidden. And that's another thing that starts to chip away at Anakin's psyche, so that by the end of the film, he's kind of so conflicted and so in love that he and Padme actually get married. And for those of you who are familiar with the story, we're really flying through the details, but we're trying to capture the grand scheme of it in the context of the Skywalkers. So, yeah. Go. All right. So now we pick up on episode 3. War has broken out in the galaxy. The peace that once was there has broken out. The once peacekeeping Jedi Order now serve as generals in this conflict. Meanwhile, Supreme Leader Palpatine, Supreme Leader, I'm mixing up, terminology. Supreme Chancellor Palpatine continues to accrue more and more power and control over the galaxy. Anakin, he's now a full-fledged Jedi Knight, continues to fight for the Republic in this war, but begins to be haunted by nightmares of his wife, Padme, dying in childbirth. She has become pregnant. Fear grips at Anakin Skywalker, causing him to seek any and every way possible to gain the power to stop this death from happening. It's this lust for power that an inability to let go of the future that leads him down the path to the dark side, and his eventual turn into becoming the infamous Dark Lord Darth Vader, who we all know and love to hate. This transformation leaves him broken and now a total slave to his new master, Supreme Chancellor Palpatine, the Sith Lord, who has been manipulating the galaxy all along. We find out he's the dark evil Sith Lord that was the supreme enemy of the Jedi Order, and from there, the Jedi Order collapses, and that, I think that's a good way to end the story for this portion. So, let's stop there. We haven't even talked about Obi-Wan Kenobi. We haven't even talked about Yoda or Count Dooku and all the others, but we do hope that this provides the overview of the story of the Skywalkers from here. So why don't we hear from someone that's not me now? Let's hear from you, Mike.
Yeah, so the prequel trilogy has gotten a lot of flack for poorly written dialogue, for just over usage of CGI and completely CGI surroundings. The only thing real in the frame is actually just the actors, and everything else is like CGI. Sometimes it's just a fully animated film, right? Like we have just all animated characters, animated backgrounds, nothing's real. So it's gotten a lot of flack over the years, but I think what I really appreciate about the prequels, and I actually do appreciate the prequels, some of them are actually one of my favorite movies in the saga, which I'll get to later, but what I love about it is this generational family story, and we haven't talked about the original trilogy yet, but this one kind of gives context for what comes next. It lays the groundwork for the original trilogy, which is Luke Skywalker. But in this saga, we focus on his father, Anakin Skywalker, how he goes from an innocent little boy in the desert who just wants to do what's right, and he wants to eventually go back to his mother, who he leaves behind, so that he could become a Jedi. And
that's right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just such a tragic story, and I just love how these generational conflicts that we see in Anakin Skywalker, his temper, his rage, his propensity towards darkness, but also he does have a good nature to him. Those things are always in conflict throughout this trilogy, and we see how it's passed down to his son in the original trilogy. So I feel like it's somehow like biblical, with when we read the Bible, we read about Abraham, and then we read about his son Isaac and how he kind of repeats the sins of his father. And then we read about Jacob, Isaac's son, and then so on. It's like a repeated cycle of sin that happens in each generation. And I feel like with Star Wars, something I love so much about it is this generational family story.
Yeah. There's definitely the sins of the father is a huge theme in Star Wars. I think another interesting thing about Anakin's story is the concept of nature versus nurture. This is a boy who is born inherently good. So we're not talking about real life and inherent depravity in human beings or anything like that. But in this story, he's conceived as a wholly good kid who, because of the way the Jedi Order had become very cold and very calculating, very by the books, by the rules. You can't do this. You can't love this. You can't be attracted to another person. All of these rules for a kid who is so gifted, who and arguably was being held back by a lot of these rules, kind of sent him down the wrong path, and he was able to, and that's how Palpatine was able to come in and manipulate his growth in a lot of ways.
And I think that's just to add on to that note about the Jedi Order that we find in the prequel trilogy. Like, that's not what the Jedi is all about, right? The Force is about actually abstaining and refraining from being like a police force, which is actually what the Jedi have become, right? They're using their power to enforce peace and to kind of safeguard the society, which, actually the Jedi are just supposed to, maintain balance in the Force, right?
Yeah,
they're not supposed to get involved in all these,
peace.
Right? They're not supposed to be like so heavily involved in political affairs and military affairs. They're almost like a military power in the prequels. And I think you can also tell by how they fight too. The way that the Jedi fight in the prequels is so different from the original trilogy. Now, you could say that maybe it's because of the time period that it was filmed in, right? Like, the prequels were made in 1999, 2002, and 2005. This is like around the time of The Matrix, where they brought like Hong Kong choreography into Hollywood. And so I think that the influence is felt in these movies from The Matrix, I think, where, they just wanted to, like, you see Yoda jumping, doing somersaults in the air with his lightsaber. Like, it's cool to look at, but this doesn't really feel like what the Jedi are actually supposed to be about. This is like a bastardized version of the Force and the teachings of the Jedi.
That's true. Yeah, there's the prequel trilogy has a lot of sword fighting that's influenced by wushu, which is more of a showy sword fighting style.
Yeah, it's very aggressive.
Yeah, very aggressive, but also very acrobatic and theatrical. Whereas in the original trilogy, it was inspired more by kendo, which is more straightforward and like quick jabs, and fencing.
Two old people poking each other with sticks.
Yes. That sword fight, which we'll get to later, I maybe we won't. The one between Vader and Obi-Wan is more inspired by fencing. And it's great because the actor who played Darth Vader lied to George Lucas and said he had experience in sword fighting, but he actually didn't. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he lied to get the part. So when it came time to film it, and they were really confused why he was terrible at it. So it took forever. Anyway,
hey, it was worth it.
Fun story. It was worth. It's in the movies. So yeah, are we ready to move forward to the next 3 films in this? Yeah. So episodes 1 through 3, it's a lot about this boy who was raised in the wrong way, arguably. And now we're going to move towards another boy and another girl in the next trilogy, the original trilogy, the one that spawned it all. This trilogy is about an unknown farm boy named Luke, who lives a quiet, boring life, but is always looking out towards the stars, towards adventure, and towards excitement. We also meet Leia Organa, a princess of the royal line of a planet called Alderaan. We first meet her when she's on the run. The Republic that was in the previous trilogy has now become an empire, and they've built a planet-destroying battle station called the Death Star. Her ship, carrying the secret blueprints for that station, is captured by the Empire, and so she sends these 2 droids to help her find a man named Kenobi. We find out later, of course, that these droids escape, and they find Luke on his planet of Tatooine, call it fate, call it the Force, call it whatever it is, but these two droids do find their way to Luke, who embarks on a journey to find out just what this Kenobi knows. And so when Luke finds him, we find out that this Kenobi is the same Obi-Wan Kenobi that lived and interacted with his father in the previous stories. But unbeknownst to Luke, Obi-Wan also knew his father, Anakin, and saw him turn into Darth Vader in person. Kenobi urges Luke to join the fight and learn the ways of the Force, but Luke refuses at first until the Empire destroys his home. So he and Kenobi then, with the help of a smuggler named Han Solo and his sidekick Chewbacca, embark on a daring mission to save Leia, join the rebellion, and eventually destroy the Death Star. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi Master who taught Anakin Skywalker, who became Darth Vader, meets him again and sacrifices himself in a rematch duel. Then we move to Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back. Luke is with the Rebel Alliance. They are on the run. Vader is angry about the loss of the Death Star and about losing to the Rebels. So he becomes obsessed for some reason with finding this young rebel who destroyed the Death Star, this Luke Skywalker, and we don't know why. But he's haunted by his old master Obi-Wan. Luke is haunted by his old master Obi-Wan, who returns to him somehow in a vision as a ghost, and tells him to continue his Jedi training with a master named Yoda on Dagobah. So as Luke trains, he decides, I need to go and face Darth Vader and protect my friends. But his training was incomplete. He was a little reckless with it. And so he goes and confronts Vader, eventually gets beat, but then Vader drops the bombshell, and that is that this Darth Vader, the evil enemy, is actually Anakin Skywalker, Luke's father. Devastated, Luke escapes and tries to regroup. Which then brings us to Episode 6. Palpatine emerges from hiding. So if we look at this in the grand scheme of the story, Palpatine was such a huge part of the first 3 films, but is kind of missing in the first 2 until he emerges in the last of the trilogy, which is interesting for later in this discussion. However, he emerges here in this episode, Episode 6. They've built another Death Star, and he has come to personally oversee the completion of this battle station. The rebellion finds out about this and decides now is the time to strike and destroy the Emperor in the process and destroy Death Star 2. Luke Skywalker has been training to be a Jedi, has built up his strength, and realizes that he needs to face his father, Vader, again. But Luke, who is also good, he's a Skywalker, so he has so much goodness and hope in his heart, and has what am I saying? Yeah. Let me start over there. Luke, with the goodness and hope in his heart, believes that his father cannot be fully evil. He believes there's still good in him. And so when he goes off to face Vader, he goes with the intention of turning him back to the light side of the Force. But he doesn't do this without first realizing and learning that he actually has a twin sister, and that twin sister is Leia. So this is crazy. And continuing to blaze through here, Luke goes off and Leia continues to fight with the rebellion, but Luke goes and faces his father again, who brings him before Palpatine, who then tries to do what he did with Anakin and seduce Luke to the dark side. But this time, Luke Skywalker, in true Jedi fashion, in the way that the Jedi originally intended, actually fights this temptation and casts aside his weapon and says, I will not strike you in anger. I am a Jedi like my father before me. Palpatine, realizing that he's not going to succeed, flies into a rage and tries to kill Luke, but this act of sacrificial love from his son inspires Darth Vader, inspires Anakin Skywalker to fulfill his destiny, bring balance to the Force, and defeat the Emperor, save his son, and win. And so that's how it goes. So, Mike, let's talk a little bit more about this portion.
I love how Star Wars is about light versus darkness.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much in the language of the entire saga. The temptations of the dark side and just wanting to be in the light. It draws a very distinct line between the two, between good and bad, good and evil. So I think, it teaches kids growing up watching this that there are good guys and there are bad guys. And there is such a thing as darkness, and it is impure, it's seductive, it's vile. And we see our protagonist, Luke, being seduced, to the dark side. We see the Emperor and Darth Vader both asking Luke to join him in their reign over the galaxy. And I feel like it teaches also, most importantly, that to kids and to everybody, is that there can be redemption for those in darkness.
Yes.
No matter how entrenched in evil or in the darkness you are, you can be brought back into the light. And I think Anakin Skywalker's ultimate redemption at the end of Return of the Jedi, Episode 6, it feels so complete and full when Luke unmasks his father for the first time so they can see each other eye to eye, and he tells Luke to tell his sister that he was right. He was right about the fact that there was good in him. And this kind of echoes what Padme has always said about him in Episode 3. So those are her final words. She was telling Obi-Wan before she died that, Anakin still has good in him. She knows it. And, I think it's a beautiful story in how it echoes in their son and in his unwavering belief in that very truth that his father is still deep down good and he can be turned back.
Mm-hmm. And I love what. Oh, go ahead. You had some more to say.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna say I love that we kind of discussed the sins of the father being passed on from generation to generation, but in this story we see that also goodness can be passed from generation to generation, and the inherent kindness that Luke Skywalker exhibits is actually from his father as well. And what's interesting, I think, that a lot of times we forget when we watch these movies is that at the end of Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, Anakin has become fully evil. He's become evil personified. He's Darth Vader. He's a machine. He's a robot. The plan, when Luke and Leia are born at the end of Episode 3, the plan for Yoda and Obi-Wan was to raise one of these kids to rise up one day and defeat Darth Vader, to kill him, basically. The plan of the Jedi was still revenge in a lot of ways. But it turns out that if Luke fulfilled that and went ahead and killed his father like the plan was supposed to be, he would have become the very thing he swore to destroy. He would have become evil himself too. He would have turned to the dark side because of the anger and the aggression that it would take to kill a man like Darth Vader. But instead, Luke completely subverted that purpose and actually succeeded where none of the Jedi could have predicted, and that is to return to what it truly means to be a Jedi, to have compassion and to lay aside violence. And I read somewhere, I believe it was Brian Young on Twitter, he once said, Luke Skywalker was never meant to be the sword of the Jedi, but its heart. And I think that's so true and so characteristic of Luke Skywalker. He was never supposed to be this warrior prince that returns and exacts vengeance upon the Sith in a violent way. And this kind of actually reminds me of how the ancient Israeli prophecies about the Messiah were read as this warrior king would one day come and defeat the Romans, and take back Israel. But instead, the Savior came in humility and exacted violence upon the gates of hell by actually dying and being and peaceably laying himself aside. So, wow, that was kind of cool. But curious to know what you think on that.
I never thought about it that way, that Luke Skywalker was never meant to be the sword or weapon of the Jedi, but actually the heart. And I think it kind of speaks to, I think, the true philosophy of the Jedi, which is non-aggression. It's about peacemaking and not reconcile. I'm bringing like Christianity into this, but
yeah.
But you know what I mean. Like it's
Yeah.
Instead of like striking down his father and destroying him, he actually does something that completely flies in the face of what, ironically, what Yoda and Obi-Wan, like these wise Jedi forefathers, like
Couldn't have foreseen. Yeah.
and that makes me wonder: is it because like they didn't get it, like Yoda and Obi-Wan? Like, do you think they fundamentally misunderstood the Jedi Order? I mean, I find that kind of interesting because Yoda's been around for 900 years training Jedi.
Yeah.
Like, how could he have missed this? But I mean, I guess you could kind of see it as kind of like the Pharisees during Jesus' time, right? Like they had an entire order of Jews who they knew the law, they knew all the traditions inside out, but still they missed the mark. Do you think it's kind of like that? Is that how you see it?
It could be. I think in the context of these films, you could definitely read it that way. In the wider canon, I don't think that is the case, at least for Yoda. But I think essentially what Yoda and Obi-Wan were doing was they were just trying to preserve the light, the light of the Jedi, until the next generation grew up, and then they would kind of figure it out as they went along. I don't think they had a master plan. When Yoda went to Dagobah, this swamp planet, and just decided to just chill there for 30, it wasn't 30 years, like 20 years. And Obi-Wan went to the desert and just chilled there, waiting for Luke Skywalker to grow up. I don't think they quite knew what they were going to do. But it did seem like they were hoping that the Emperor would be defeated in some way. And I suppose if you just fought a long war, you would assume, like the Clone Wars, right? You would assume, oh, we got to defeat them. We got to take back what's ours by force. I mean, that's always the initial instinct. You would never think we're going to win this by just laying aside our weapons. But that's exactly what happened. And I don't think it's so much a pharisaical, like, misunderstanding of the Force, but I think it was more like, I don't know what's going to happen. Just go and defeat him. You're you're young and you're his son, so maybe you can beat him or something, but he completely did what they couldn't see, and that was to believe that there was still good in someone who seemed so inherently evil. But I think, that's a big part of the story and the philosophy of that original batch of Star Wars films.
Yeah, and I gotta say, while I don't necessarily agree with all the worldviews behind the Force and behind the Jedi and Star Wars in general, I do like how there is an acknowledgement of the existence of a spiritual realm, right?
Yeah.
And I like how the fate of the galaxy actually rests on the balance of this Force, whether or not people are acknowledging it. And most people in the galaxy that we see in Star Wars, they don't know anything about the Force.
That's right. It's just the superstition to a lot of the galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, now we have the Mandalorian, and we see Baby Yoda using the Force, right? And then the Mandalorian actually has no explanation. Like, he has no idea what he just saw, like what that was.
Yeah.
And I think that's very telling to the state of the galaxy, even after the defeat of the Empire and the Emperor. Like, nearly all people just don't know what it is.
Yeah. And so, it was kind of, Luke Skywalker was the only Jedi, and I guess his sister was the only person who had Jedi potential that they knew of. And it seems that the next step for them after all of this would be for Luke to build a new Jedi Order. But that leads us to the last trilogy of films, which is incomplete, but we do have two of them that we have seen, Episode 7, The Force Awakens, and Episode 8, The Last Jedi. you would think these films now take place 30 years after the original trilogy, and you would think there would be a burgeoned Jedi Order. The Jedi Order has returned because Luke succeeded. But we find out that actually things haven't quite gone the way we think. From the opening crawl, the very first sentence we see in this new era is, Luke Skywalker has vanished. And wow, what a bold way to start a new set of movies. You know, in a beloved franchise with beloved characters, this character that we've been waiting all this time to see again is gone. He's out of the picture. And it's crazy. The galaxy has been kind of at peace, but Luke is gone. The rebellion has become the New Republic. Leia has married Han Solo and given birth to a son named Ben, but they lose him to the dark side of the Force, we find out. And his name is now Kylo Ren. He was seduced by this mysterious being who seems to be a Palpatine-esque villain named Snoke. And there's a shadow organization that rose from the ashes of the fallen empire called the First Order. A lot of things have returned to a state of chaos, and it's kind of crazy for viewers. But we know that in the western reaches of space, far from the center of galactic activity, there's a young scavenger girl whose name is simply Rey, and we don't know anything about her. But we find out that she has the Force as well and goes on this adventure. And in the end, she crosses paths with Leia again, who has been looking for her brother Luke to aid in the new conflict against the First Order. And she sends Rey, who seems to have innate Force abilities, to Luke to try to find him and bring him back and maybe spark something new. And we don't know where Luke has been, what he's been up to. Maybe he's just been lost, or his ship broke down on some planet and he hasn't been able to get out. We don't know anything at this point what happened. So at the end of episode 7, Rey, this girl who has the Force but we don't know anything about, meets Luke Skywalker, the legend. And now we enter episode 8, The Last Jedi, in which Rey meets Luke, hopeful to begin to train as a Jedi, but we find out that Luke has given up all hope, because what happened actually is he did raise up a Jedi Order, a new Jedi Order, and one of his main pupils was his nephew, Ben Solo, his sister's son. But it turns out that he turned to the darkness because of something Luke did, as we see in the film. And he just has cut himself off from the Force and has really lost all hope. And Rey doesn't know what to do, so she actually seeks out Kylo Ren to try to change his mind or turn him. Again, notice this central figure, Rey. She's a lot like Luke in that she has this compassion for someone who's fallen to evil and wants to go and save that inherent light. And so they face off, and there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in The Last Jedi. Rey and Kylo Ren face off. She tries to turn Kylo/Ben, but Ben actually turns around and kills Snoke and becomes the supreme leader of the entire First Order. He then moves to crush the Resistance once and for all. Meanwhile, Luke, in exile, projects himself in what it can only be described as Force projection. He basically sends a holograph of himself across space and time to defeat Ben, his nephew, and then give the Resistance a chance to escape. So we're now at the point where in The Rise of Skywalker, we don't know what's happened. The Resistance was reduced to the size of a group of people that could fit in a small freighter. And Luke Skywalker, in the effort that he did to save the Resistance, died. and Rey is now alone, and that's where we pick up with the Rise of Skywalker now. It's kind of hard to give a big overarching overview for this trilogy because we don't know actually how it ends, and 9 is going to be crucial in how we kind of summarize it, but that's the best we can do for now.
I love the sequel trilogy. I mean, there's a lot for me to talk about, but I think I'm going to save it for the Star Wars ranking because I give more. I have a lot more to say about each specific movie.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we can move into that, but I would just say again, there is so much that could happen with this trilogy, and 9 has so much potential to really wrap up all these stories, and we're really looking forward to it. This summary is incomplete at best. We do know that Luke Skywalker is gone. We do know that a lot of the main heroes of the old stories are gone, and Rey has to carry on the legacy of the Jedi. But we'll find out together what happens. I have theories. I've also read some stuff online, potentially as accurate leaks, but I won't go there. Don't worry. Any last thoughts before we kind of move on into the rankings? I want to hear what your thoughts are on this trilogy, so let's move into that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to rank all the Star Wars films, the ones that have been released in theaters so far, in order of how we feel about them. I think the criteria, at least on my end, I don't know what your criteria exactly is, Mike, is not necessarily quality of film, though that matters a lot, but general enjoyment of the whole experience as well. Does that sound kind of like what your criteria was?
Yeah, I just rank them according to my personal enjoyment. So, some people may have issues with how I have ranked them, but again, it's. I think both of our lists are purely subjective. So,
no, this is empirical fact. Like our rankings are binding across all time.
I honestly think I have not seen a single Star Wars list that is the same. Everyone has strong opinions about Star Wars, and we're going to see everyone has wildly different rankings from each other. I have some controversial choices in like my top 3, and I'm sure you do too. So I think we got to say we're going to start at the bottom of the list, and we're going to work our way up to our number 1 Star Wars movies.
All right.
So do you want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. So we're going from 10, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my 10th is Attack of the Clones, Episode 2. Do I need to explain a little bit?
I mean, I have a lot of notes for each movie, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you. I feel like I've been talking a lot. I want to hear from you.
Okay. My number 10 is The Phantom Menace.
Okay.
People bash on the prequels. A lot of people don't give them a chance. And I know some people who don't even acknowledge their existence, kind of like how I don't acknowledge The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions. I'm not one of those people. Okay, whenever I rewatch the prequels, I keep in mind that, yes, while these movies did not have the greatest dialogue or execution, the overarching story and character arcs were actually really good and entertaining, and they actually build up to a very dramatic climax, which you kind of alluded to earlier. And I think I really enjoy the prequels and the prequel era stories, like the Clone Wars TV show. So I actually have really strong feelings for the prequels. I have a certain fondness for it.
Nice.
Except The Phantom Menace.
Oh, okay.
And now, even with me being extremely forgiving as a viewer of the writing and the dialogue and, execution and whatnot, I just can't get through this movie without wanting to skip like dozens of scenes. My biggest question about The Phantom Menace is, who is this movie made for? There's wacky slapstick comedy on one hand, which is pretty much like a cartoon, a kid's cartoon, and then on the other hand, we have lengthy scenes of people sitting around in a room talking about taxation and trade routes, vote of no confidence in the Senate. it's just like it's such a bizarre movie to me, and I think there's an interesting story in here about Palpatine's rise in the Senate, which also coincides with the discovery of young Anakin Skywalker in Tatooine. I think these two stories should have been streamlined, and then all that other stuff about the trade war, whatever that is, like, dude, like I would have wanted to see more of Palpatine and Anakin.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to get through this movie, and I sometimes, if it were up to me, I would just skip it. I end up skipping half the movie anyways because I just don't feel like I can sit through so much talking. In a Star Wars movie.
Love. That's totally fair. That film is pretty low on my list as well. I guess I'll just piggyback off of your rankings, I suppose. That's what we'll do here. I'll tell my ranking, but then I'll go off of we'll discuss the films based on your rankings, at least in that order. Episode 1.
Why don't you say your number 10 and then just explain why you put it at number 10?
Oh yeah. Well, I did say that my number 10 is episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I just think it's the most poorly acted of all the movies. I just think the execution of what could have been some really cool story beats just did not land, does not work. It's also the first film in this saga that's filmed on digital HD cameras, and it really shows. The age of that technology from 2002 just does not look very good. And so that's mainly why that is my number 10 movie in this saga. Let's move to number 9.
All right, my number 9 is Solo. I found this movie to be entertaining to watch, but somewhat pointless. There were a lot of reveals in this movie, like how did Han meet Chewie? How did Han meet Lando? How did Han get his name? None of it felt necessary. Like, these aren't questions that anyone was actually wondering. Now, there were 3 movies dedicated to showing how Anakin Skywalker turns into Darth Vader. That story was necessary. So much was discussed about Anakin's arc actually in the original trilogy, which begged movies to show that his descent into the dark side. There is nothing hinted at about Han Solo's past in these movies. He's an awesome character, and we just love him as he is. I don't think anyone had questions about how he got his name. Like, why? Like, no one. I don't know anyone who was wondering that. Now, the Darth Maul reveal at the end was great. I thought I was kind of excited to see more. Perhaps maybe on one of those Disney Plus shows, like Darth Maul may show up, Han Solo may show up. We'll see. But I really, really wished Phil Lord and Chris Miller got to complete their Solo movie. There's a scene where Han tells a group of enemies, this is like towards the end of the movie, that he tells a group of enemies that are ganging up on him that he has a bunch of friends on the Millennium Falcon who will come and back him up. And then at that moment, as he's saying that, the Falcon actually takes off and leaves. That felt like a Lord and Miller moment, and I feel like if they actually completed the movie, it would have been filled with funny, humorous moments like that. And I think we needed that movie. We needed that movie that's like lighthearted. It's snappy dialogue. It's fun. There's a lot of great comedic timing. But instead, what we got was just, it's like by the beats, by the numbers type of origin story that it's interesting, but it doesn't really have that much. It's not very exciting.
No, it's pretty. It feels a lot like a TV episode more than anything substantial.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, I totally feel you. That one's pretty low on my list too. But my number 9 is a movie called Rogue One. This film has the coolest concept you could imagine. It's what was the rebellion like right before Episode 4. You could explore the gritty side of the war. You could explore all sorts of things. But instead, it came out to a semi-cheesy, inspirational film that really kind of didn't do anything. It showed, again, it was kind of like Solo in that it answered a few questions none of us were asking, and just was mired in the cheesiest dialogue in this side of George Lucas's typewriter. Oh boy, it was so. There are redeeming moments. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it for the visuals. It's one of the more visually gripping of all the Star Wars films, I would say. There's CGI technology for bringing back Tarkin from the dead in a way. There was the Vader sequence in the hallway that was really cool. But all in all, a pretty unsatisfying experience. It didn't really grip me in any real way, and they tried really hard to make it feel like this inspirational movie that's trying to say something, but all it's saying is, we write cheesy speeches, and you should feel hope because of it, and it just didn't work for me.
Yeah,
Moving on.
I mean, it didn't work for me either. It's your number 9 is actually my number 8, so
There we go.
mean, I feel about it the same way as you do. You know, it's similar to Solo. Was this really necessary?
Yeah.
Right. The entire world lived 4 years without needing the Death Star flaw explained. So, you know, I think we were good. We didn't need this. But, you know, like you said, it's cool seeing Darth Vader. It was cool having some cameos like 3PO, R2-D2, the guy from the bar in Tatooine. It was like you said, like I kind of enjoyed seeing the rebellion before Episode 4, and also seeing what the galaxy was like under the Empire. It's like very different than what you see in the prequels. So I think it's a pretty good bridge between the two trilogies. But you know, I think in the end it just feels like fan fiction. Like I didn't feel anything for the characters, and so when they all died at the end, I didn't really care. They had some cool designs, but you know that was pretty much it. Really, even though we knew what the stakes were, right? These people gave their lives to get the Death Star plans. I somehow didn't feel that invested with the characters. Not to say it's a bad movie by any means. Like I don't think any of these are truly horrible movies.
Yeah.
You know, so I would say, you know, I enjoyed watching it, but I don't feel compelled to revisit it like how I do with some of these other movies.
Yeah. I hear you. It's fun, but non-essential, and that's kind of why we didn't really talk about it in the earlier section of this podcast.
Yeah.
My number 8 was also Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. We've talked enough about that film. Let's move to number 7. What is your number 7, Mike?
My number 7 is Attack of the Clones.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The dialogue is probably the worst in the saga. Probably one of the worst in cinematic history. But
I'm haunted by the scar.
we can dedicate an entire episode to the lines in that movie. And it's not just Anakin's lines. Please, Padme had some lines. Obi-Wan had some lines. George Lucas made sure to spread the love. But if you left everything in the movie exactly the same, all the scenes, the costumes, the plot beats, the action, the special effects, everything's exactly the same, but just change the dialogue and therefore the performances, you actually, I think, get a pretty good movie. And I think there are threads in this movie that are just really interesting to me, like the assassination plot against Padme Amidala.
Yep.
That leads Obi-Wan to... Yeah, Obi-Wan's like investigating. There's like this mystery of a missing planet, and then on that planet he discovers there's a clone army. And Anakin Skywalker, he's a rising Jedi, but he's assigned to protect Padme and leads them to fall in love with each other. I think that's a template for a really cool romance. And Anakin's also being haunted by dreams of his mother, and he searches for her and ultimately fails to save her from death. And this sets the stage for his ultimate downfall as a hero. So I think that's all great. And, but it's really unfortunate that all we remember is I don't like sand.
Yeah. All right, let's pause real quick. Angela's walking in. You can come in.
Sorry.
Hey. No, not yet. We're almost done, Mike. Hi, Mike.
Yeah. Hi.
She says hi. All right. Cool. So we just talked about what is it? Episode our number 7, right? Okay, I'm ready to keep rolling if you are.
Yeah.
Okay. So my number 7 is Solo. Notice how all of these are kind of bunched up together very similarly. That should give you a clue right there. Any other thoughts on Solo before we move up to number 6? I think we're good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, number 6. Tell me your number 6.
My number 6 is The Last Jedi. There's a quote from Supreme Leader Snoke in this film that pretty much summarizes my thoughts. And look at you, the deed split your bones, your spirit to the bone. You're unbalanced. There are things that I love about There are things that I love about this movie. The opening shot that zooms through the ships, the space battles, I think they're my favorite in the saga. Mm-hmm. The opening battle with Rose's sister trying to drop all those bombs. And then we have Poe doing a maneuver where he kind of drifts in his X-Wing, which makes him like put a hand to the side of the cockpit to like push against it so he doesn't like hit the side. I think it all just felt so visceral and tactile, like you were actually there. And I think my problem with the other films and the space battles, I just kind of feel pretty disengaged because there's just so much crap being shot at each other, and it's not the easiest to follow. You know, it's just a bunch of lasers, you know, being shot. I love the Snoke throne room scene where he gets taken out, and Rey and Kylo Ren, they fight the Praetorian Guards. It looks like an art film. The twist about Rey's parentage, I did not see that coming. And it somewhat feels appropriate, you know, like almost the reversal of the Darth Vader twist in Empire. Mm-hmm. And I think the visuals, red and white in the movie, he's constantly using that throughout the film. It's beautiful. And the arcs for Finn, Rey, Poe, Kylo Ren, I just love what Rian Johnson did and how he focused on bringing us through each character's journey in this film. Like, you feel like they're way more fleshed out after this film. But there's also a lot of things I really did not like about The Last Jedi. Freaking Leia Mary Poppinsing in space. It just looks so dumb. Luke, I don't have any problems with Leia using the Force, but it's just the visuals, it just looks super cheesy. Luke tossing the lightsaber without saying a word after Rey hands it to him. Like, we've waited 2 years for this moment. And it's just, all that excitement is just undercut by the abruptness of that scene, of that action. He could have said a couple words. There could have been an exchange of dialogue, and he could have just dropped it or thrown it. I think that it would have softened that kind of blow. But it's so abrupt and jarring in this film, the way it's done. Canto Bite. That's all I have to say. Canto Bite, that whole thing did not work. I'm fine with Rose as a character. Yeah, I'm fine with Rose as a character, but I didn't understand why she needed to be a character. Like, why couldn't Finn and Poe just be together and just create an arc for both of them? All right, and here's where I get really pissed off. Broom Kid. This movie has the best opening shot in the saga and also the worst final shot of the saga. And I get the message. It's a nice one, right? Anyone can be a hero. That's nice. Okay, but that message does not belong in this saga. This saga is about the Skywalker family. And I know online critics who generally love the film embrace the idea that a hero and a Jedi can come from anywhere. We already know that, okay? We already know from the prequels that anyone can be a Jedi. There's a freaking entire Jedi Order, Force users everywhere in the prequels. We know that already, okay? We know that it's not just a Skywalker family that has this power. But it's just this family is strong with the Force, and that's okay. It's okay if certain people are stronger than others, okay? You don't need to like bash it over our heads like this. It just feels so out of place. The movie could have just ended with the Millennium Falcon going into hyperspace, and that's it. That's the end of the movie. Oh my gosh, I just can't stand that last shot. And another thing I don't like is that this movie doesn't deepen the mythology of Star Wars. We don't learn anything new about the Force or the history of the Jedi and the Sith. I thought we were going to get that because Luke was searching for the first Jedi temple. It just seems like Rian Johnson's more interested in deepening the characters, which, you know, is fine. You know, but I personally want more from Star Wars than just that. Like I wanted more mythology. I wanted more lore. I really think the most subversive thing, and Rian Johnson's really big on subverting expectations in this movie. I think the most subversive thing actually would have been to have Rey join Kylo Ren at the end. I think that would have been a really bold choice, and I think I would have loved it because, that's completely unexpected, and it kind of puts the plot in a really difficult situation. And I think when you put your characters in those situations, I think it makes it really interesting. So I'm split to the bone on The Last Jedi. I'm unbalanced. I sympathize with people who love it, and I also sympathize with people who don't. So I get both sides. And I think it really is up to episode 9 to bring all these characters and arcs home, because I think the way that they were left at the end of 8, to me, it wasn't the most satisfying as a fan. Like I feel like I just feel like a lot hinges on 9, and maybe 9 may improve 8 for me. So we'll see. I had to spend the longest time talking about this one because I love The Force Awakens, and this was kind of a disappointing follow-up.
I hear you. I totally hear you. And, feel free to have, show a little more emotion in these reviews. I'm just kidding. No, that's... I'm
guessing your number 6 is not The Last Jedi.
No, it's not. My number 6 is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The best of the prequel films. It's just pure drama. It's theater. It's tragedy. It's a Greek tragedy. It's red. It's full of doom, full of gloom, full of operatic despair. It also has the greatest lightsaber duel in the entire saga still to this day. I liked it a lot. It's a little down there just because as a whole package, it still feels like quite a messy film. It's not the most well directed, or the dialogue still isn't that strong, but it is an enjoyable film. And we're starting to move into the portion of this list where I just truly enjoyed each one of these films. And again, like you said earlier, Star Wars, there's no bad movies in any of these, but these are the ones that I truly love now. So I have thoughts on The Last Jedi, but I'll save that for when we get to it in my ranking. Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Yeah, let's move to number 5. Tell me your number 5.
My number 5 is Return of the Jedi. And kind of like Last Jedi, I feel like there are absolute highs and lows in the saga with this one. The Force is strong in my family. That monologue that Luke gives to Leia, to me, that's the heart of the saga. It's about this family, right? And it's about this lineage of his father has it, he has it, his sister has it, and he looks at his sister, and then that's when she realizes who she is and who she's related to. Yeah, it's a powerful moment. I love that scene, brother and sister talking. I love Luke confronting Darth Vader, his father, and then those scenes. He confronts Darth Vader, and then eventually the Emperor Palpatine, and these things bring episodes 1 through 6 to completion. And it's what I really hope for episode 9 is to do the same for the entire saga. You feel all those prequel arcs paying off here, and I know the prequels were made way after this, but it did such a great job in just kind of feeling like a complete story.
Right.
So while those are some of my favorite moments in the saga, there's also scenes like dancing aliens in Jabba's palace. We sang that song to each other so often when we used to work with each other. There's the entire rescue scene in Jabba's palace, where each one of them takes turns walking in and getting rejected by Jabba and getting thrown in jail. It just seems kind of silly, like Muppets. And then there's Ewoks. I don't know. When we cut from Luke versus Vader and Palpatine, it's like mature and dark and weighty. we cut to teddy bears throwing rocks on stormtroopers and swinging in the forest. Like, it's just, you couldn't have made two polar opposite movies and slapped them into one. So I generally enjoy this movie when I skip a lot of those scenes that I just mentioned. So I actually have less problems with this than The Last Jedi. But I think, if I have to skip scenes in a movie, it's not as entertaining. I feel like it's a sign of that it's not as entertaining.
Gotcha. This is
What's
where
your
our
number
lists start
5?
our lists start to really change here. My number 5 is actually the original, A New Hope, Star Wars.
Oh, interesting.
It's fallen simply because this is gonna sound a little sacrilegious, but it's kind of a slow film. It's kind of boring in some parts. It's janky. The effects aren't there, and obviously this was this film was George Lucas's first Star Wars film, so obviously a lot of the lower production stuff gets put on this film, and that's totally fine. I think Luke Skywalker is at his most annoying in this one. He's very whiny, and for good reason. I mean, he's supposed to be a farm boy who's bored out of his mind, so I totally get it. But the lightsaber battle, as we mentioned earlier, is just really, really weak and not visually interesting at all. It is fun though. It's the one that started it all. I don't hate it, but if I gave the negatives just to explain why it's so low on my list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, just to piggy off of that, my number 4 is A New Hope as well.
Okay.
And I agree with you. The beginning of the movie is slow, and some things haven't aged as well. But it is a template for the modern blockbuster. It's the ultimate hero's journey, right? Being plucked from obscurity into a huge galactic war.
Right.
There's a lot of backstory that's hinted at in the dialogue. It leaves so much to be explored, and it's a lot of fun when Luke, Han, and Leia are together for the first time. I think Han Solo is instantly my favorite character. In
really?
this trilogy. Yeah. I like his sense of humor. Let's just say.
Nice. Yeah, so my number 4 is The Force Awakens. This is the film that started our friendship in a lot of ways and spawned the name of this podcast. I will never forget the experience of watching this movie on opening night.
Yes.
It brought Star Wars back after 14 long years of not knowing if Star Wars was ever going to come back, and it did, and it did it all. J.J. Abrams asked the defining question, what would delight us? And boy, did he delight me, and so many others, to the tune of 900 million domestic, and did it cross 2 billion worldwide? Yeah, it did.
Yep.
It was a worldwide phenomenon. I to those who say this is a carbon copy of A New Hope, I would say you have no eyes and have poor taste in films, because it is quite different. It is quite different. There's a lot of visual cues that are very similar, but beyond that, it's a different story. It really is, and it's great. It really did what it needed to do. It created a new saga, or I guess a new trilogy for this saga, and the ramifications of this film are still being felt, because we have the conclusion of this trilogy coming in less than 2 weeks. Yeah, but that's my number 4, and it's just a great film. I enjoy it. I still get super happy and excited when we watch it. Yeah, I'm guessing you'll have thoughts on this, so
I definitely have thoughts, so I will definitely add on that later.
Yeah, let's move on. So, what was your number 4? Did we say? Did you say?
Yeah, it was A New Hope.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay, so now we're reaching
at 3.
The top 3.
Yes, top 3.
My number 3 is Revenge of the Sith. I think I'm one of the few people who rank it this high, but I just feel like this is the film that George Lucas wanted to make all along. with the prequels. The
You're right.
political drama between Palpatine and the Jedi Order, Anakin's descent into the darkness, and how it continues what was laid out in Attack of the Clones, his ultimate transformation into Darth Vader. The whole takedown of the Jedi Order, Anakin's massacring of the Jedi Temple, it's so dramatic, so operatic in how tragic it is. It's just so grand, and I think the emotions of just seeing everything fall apart is I think it was really effective. I think he did a really great job in this film. I think I agree with you. What you said earlier, it has the best lightsaber battle in the saga, Obi-Wan versus Anakin. The speed at which they go at each other is insane. And it really feels like it was a fight between two Jedi masters. And, you know, at our podcast at one point, we were thinking about naming it New Empire Podcast because of an exchange that Obi-Wan and Anakin have. What does Anakin say in that scene, Job?
Wait, can you repeat that? You broke up a little there.
So our podcast was at one point titled New Empire Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because of an exchange that Obi-Wan and Anakin have in this movie. So,
That's
Job,
right.
what does he say? He says, Anakin says, I have brought
Peace, freedom, and justice to my new empire.
And Obi-Wan responds,
Your new empire? Don't make me kill you.
We quoted that scene so much to each other.
Yeah. It is unbelievable.
Your new empire.
Your new empire. Hey, and another funny memory is when I was a kid, and my brother was a kid too. Well, I guess we were both kids. That was a line we quoted to each other even back then when it first came out. So it's an enduring part of the George Lucas canon. You know, it's just it'll go down as one of the greatest lines in cinematic history. That exchange right there. So. Yeah, so there you have it. That's Mike's number 3. My number 3 is The Last Jedi. So actually I adore this film. It's my favorite thing that Disney has created so far. Rian Johnson is quickly becoming one of my favorite directors, one of my favorite filmmakers. He just produces works of art that are so challenging and interesting, but also have a lot of heart to it. And I would just simply say the reason I really love The Last Jedi is because they did truly get Luke Skywalker's character right. We all were expecting he would kind of come back with a lightsaber and take down some fools and, like we referenced earlier, be the sword of the Jedi. But in reality, he was a broken man because of his failure, and he couldn't reconcile it. He couldn't live with himself. He was so guilt-ridden because of his failure to raise up a new Jedi Order. But in the end, he didn't let it define him. In a lot of ways, he eventually, with some help from Rey coming into his life and kind of telling him that he still can do something about it, just as he once did with Vader so long ago, in saying there is still hope, there is still good in you. He comes back and projects himself and just owns his nephew. I just love this film. Like you said, Mike, there are some missteps. I think Canto Bight just could have been excised from the film and we wouldn't have missed anything. I wish they spent more time on Luke and Rey and their relationship. But overall, I think it's a great film. It's not perfect, but I enjoy it a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. I know you are a Last Jedi apologist, and I appreciate you because actually, you know, what I love about the movie is all because of you and you convincing me to give it another chance. So thank you for always standing up for The Last Jedi. I mean, it is, I agree with you. There are a lot of merits to this film. It's not, by no means, not a terrible movie.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty anti like popcorn summer blockbuster style, in that it is about something deeper that's beneath the surface. And I think if you look if you don't look past the fact that Luke was, drinking space cow milk and just being a generally disgusting hobo of a human being in a lot of it, you're gonna miss what this is all about. But that's okay. I mean, if people don't like it, I totally get it too. We didn't like it when we first emerged from this film, so
yeah,
we'll see what 9 does for its legacy. What's your number 3, Mike?
My number 2.
Oh, number 2. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been over an hour.
My number 2 is Empire Strikes Back. Objectively,
Whoa.
this is a
That's
perfect
a surprise. Sorry.
Film.
We didn't
see.
share about this. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you'll see.
Wow.
Empire is a perfect film, objectively. I think it's the best Star Wars movie ever made, objectively. I think every story counts in this movie, and it's in all equal parts entertaining, right? We have Han, Leia, Chewie, 3PO, so much fun. Their adventure in space, evading the Empire. There's a romance between Han and Leia. I think that's an all-timer. The way Han draws out Leia's feelings is hilarious. It's charming. Luke and Yoda, how it deepens the mythology of Star Wars. This middle chapter does that for this trilogy. That's what I so wanted from The Last Jedi and didn't get. That's why I was disappointed with it.
Yeah.
Darth Vader and the Emperor, that connection to that deep Star Wars backstory about Anakin Skywalker, that's revealed here in this movie. And then there's twists and surprises, right? We have Han Solo being frozen in carbonite. We have the greatest twist in the history of cinema. Darth Vader revealing that he is Luke's father. People who have never seen Star Wars, who don't know a thing about Star Wars, they've heard of that line.
Yes,
it's just so iconic. The imagery in this film, the colors. And at the end of this movie, we're just left with, where could all this go, right? We don't know where the saga can go after this, and I just love it so much. It's so much fun. It knows how to have fun, and it also knows how to take things seriously. It's a perfect film.
It is the perfect film, which is funny that my number 2 is also this film. I completely agree with you. It's probably, I would still say it's the best film quality wise in this whole saga. For all the reasons you stated. I also think it looks really great. It's got this grittiness to it that Irving Kershner lends to it, that gives it kind of an indie look almost. It's not slick, and it just looks great. That's all I'll add to that. It's a challenging film. It challenges our main characters, and sets up what is a triumphant last portion. But let's hear our number 1s now, Mike.
My number 1 is the movie that made us like really much, pretty much BFFs. We fell in love, that night. Honestly, that night I remember so clearly.
Yes.
We ate Costco pizza beforehand. We were so stoked and excited. We walked into the movie. We were there a couple hours early just to hang out, and it was like December. The air was cold. I remember all these details, and we go into the movie, and it just blew us away. And we both came out of that movie emotionally satisfied but drained because of the roller coaster that it took us on. The Force Awakens, man. I love how this movie made us fall in love with Rey, Finn, Poe, Kylo Ren in the first 40 minutes.
Yes.
It introduces these characters in such an artful and creative way. Rey and Finn, they don't utter a single word in their first scenes. We are shown who these characters are rather than told. And, when I first watched it, I kept wondering how Luke, Leia, and Han were going to be reintroduced into the story. But, after meeting the new characters, I actually forgot about them. I forgot about the fact that, oh, hey, we have all these legacy characters in here. And then we have that scene where Rey and Finn are running away from the First Order. And then we pan over to the ship that Rey calls garbage. And it's the freaking Millennium Falcon. And I remember that pan to the Falcon, it brought the entire house down. That whole action sequence mixes old and new together, occupying the same space that we're so familiar with inside the Falcon. It's a master play in nostalgia, and it takes a step forward for the franchise while still relishing the past.
Nice.
I adore this film. It makes me feel so good, and I think that's what Star Wars is about. Rey is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. I think when she gets a lightsaber from Kylo Ren at the end, I shed tears of joy. Seeing this girl from nowhere snatch it away from the heir to the Skywalker family. There's so much mystery to who she is, where she comes from in this film, and how she got so powerful. I think some of these questions haven't been answered yet, so I really can't wait to see her arc in Episode 9. J.J. Abrams created this character, so I'll let him close out Rey's arc. I love Kylo Ren, how he's tortured by the legacy of his family, how badly he wants to live up to his grandfather's reputation. I can go on and on about The Force Awakens. This is the movie that made me love Star Wars. Like, I've seen all the movies I multiple times before this came out. I just never was a huge fan. I never was emotionally invested. This is the movie that did it for me. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. It's actually one of my favorite movies of the decade.
Wow. I almost don't want to say what my number one is now. I don't think I could wax nearly as poetic as you just did there.
No, we got
well done.
I just, I love Star Wars, man. And this is the one, when I talk about it, I'm like, yes, this is what Star Wars is to me.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I love that. All of that I agree with. And let's close it up. My number one is Return of the Jedi. To me, this is my favorite Star Wars movie, not because of the quality. There are some missteps. There are some weird instances. It's a little unevenly paced, but I love Luke Skywalker in this. He's like, this is what this saga, at least to me, is all about. It's about Luke. It's about how he's the heart of the Jedi. He's a guy who put himself out on a limb, not to become an action hero, but to save his father through love and compassion. And it sounds so cheesy, and I'm pretty sure some folks would go like, "Oh no, I mean he's supposed to be stronger than that or whatever." But to me, Luke has always been that, and that's why he endures as one of my favorite heroes in fiction, because of that. And so,
I mean, just his outfit is so awesome in this film. He looks like like a priest / monk.
Yeah. And what's great is he does get challenged by the temptation to the dark side. His outfit is black. He's worn kind of lighter shades throughout that trilogy previous, but he appears in black robes, and he force chokes those Gamorrean guards, the pig guards, and you wonder, oh my gosh, is this guy gonna fall? The temptation is so real. And when Palpatine kind of keeps taunting him, "Strike me down with all of your hatred, and your journey towards the dark side will be complete." It's like, yeah, you feel that. You just pulled that up. Anyway, you just feel that. You feel that. Yeah, I want to strike you down, you jerk. But he didn't. Well, he kind of did, and tried to, but in the end, he was able to control his emotions and win. And so that is why The Return of the Jedi is my favorite movie. And I do think 9 could feel a lot like it, but we shall see. So
yes, we shall see.
We shall see. So there you have it, folks. That's our Star Wars retrospective podcast. I hope you stuck around. It's been an hour and a half now, and if you did, thank you so much for listening so far. I can't believe we have made this many episodes of this podcast. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to finishing the Star Wars Skywalker saga with you all. So stay tuned. We're probably going to do a review on 9 shortly after it comes out, and you'll hear us either weep with bitterness that the saga has closed with a whimper, or just hopefully we'll just hear more of what Mike said with The Force Awakens. More joy.
I want to be I want to have tears in my eyes like Richard E. Grant, who saw the cast screening and just took to Twitter, just expressed how much he loved it. I want to be that guy. We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. So there you have it, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight. This has been the Week in Foolish Movie Podcast. We'll see you later.
Farewell.